Hi, good day, and welcome to Historia Nobis podcast, the story of us. Now, the Historia Nobis podcast will be set in different playlists, focusing on different topics. However, on this topic, I want to reference US history or North American history generally, and also more specifically, seeing historical events in their given context. Now, I'm going to reference a number of historical figures in this regard. And first in this series, I'm going to reference Abraham Lincoln, who was President of the United States, of course, during the Civil War. Now, there are a number of people living today who deem Lincoln as being evil or bad or wrong for having racist views towards black people. Now, one thing is that, yes, in the early 21st century, we believe that every human, practically of every description, whether racial, gender, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, as in, say, transgender, I think I said religion, nationality, practically of any description should have the same basic human respect and consideration. Now, such a value did not exist in Lincoln's lifetime. Let's be honest about this. For one, women didn't have the same rights, were not seen as equal as men. And certainly black people in Lincoln society, well, in most Western societies were not. And not just in the United States, but in Europe too. During the mid-19th century, the United States wasn't as powerful a country in geopolitical terms as it was today. It was on the cusp. And I think it only really achieved its potential once the Civil War was over and Manifest Destiny kicked in, and it was able to become the world's biggest economy around, say, the 1780s and 1880s. The British Empire still was big around, the French Empire, the German Empire, the Belgians, the Dutch, and European colonialism and morality generally was based, let's be honest, on white supremacy. So, to summarize Lincoln's views on blacks and on slavery, Lincoln generally believed that blacks were not equal to whites, though he did abhor and detest the institution of slavery. So he felt that blacks should be free, they should not be considered property, they should be free men with rights, but not to the same degree as whites. Moreover, he advocated a position what would be called voluntary resettlement. An example of this would be, there are two countries today in West Africa, which obviously was part of the or major region for the transatlantic slave trade, in part to the United States, of course, or so we say originally the British colonies, and then was to become the United States. There are two countries in West Africa today, Sierra Leone and Liberia, which I believe border Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, and I think Burkina Faso. Sierra Leone was established by the British in the late 18th century to resettle and rehouse free slaves from the Caribbean and from North America. Liberia was founded for the same purpose by the Americans in the early 19th century. So Lincoln had something of that vein Either you establish a colony, it could be in Central America or the Caribbean or in Africa itself, to rehouse or repatriate slaves. Lincoln, as aforementioned, he didn't believe that blacks should have the same rights as whites, though he did believe that blacks should not be slaves. And also he did believe that due to centuries of tension and, in his mind, inherent racial or inherent differences, period, between the races, that whites and blacks could not live on an equal footing in society. Now, by our standards, yes, that would be considered highly racist, even if he did not believe in slavery per se. Well, not per se, not at all. He still did not believe in what we would perceive to be true racial equality. However, like in most cultures and eras, beliefs occupy a spectrum. For example, let's take, at the time I'm recording this, the US has just had this presidential election which Trump won. Trump obviously is a Republican slash GOP. So in the GOP, that's, for those who don't know, the grand old party, so a Republican nickname. Obviously, Lincoln was a Republican. So just like in Lincoln's day and in Trump's day today, there are many different shades of Republican. You have some who are very liberal, who may believe in, say, gay rights or gay marriage or even the legalization of drugs. You have some conservative who have more or less the opposite beliefs, but still would consider themselves as different shades of Republican. The same was true in the United States too. You'd have had some whites in the United States around the Civil War era, who were very pro social equality, racial equality in all regards. You'd have had some on the opposite spectrum who would have thought that blacks deserved to be slaves. And remember, we have to remember that the curse of Ham I think is in Genesis, or certainly one of the early books of the Bible, of the Old Testament. I think it's in the first 5 books. The curse of Ham was used to justify slavery. So if God could do this, then who are we to argue with God's own teachings, as it were? Now, Lincoln's views were very moderate in the context of white America, since there were quite a few people who wanted to retain slavery, even within the Union. Whilst the Union did fight to abolish slavery, there are many others in the Union who fought just to retain the concept of a United States based directly on the principles of the founding fathers, such as Jefferson and Franklin and Washington and John Adams, etc. So to call Lincoln a racist is, I think, committing one of the, if one pardons the term, one of the grave sins, I think, of historical analysis. We cannot really translate contemporary morality onto eras and figures who by no stretch had the means to know of and even accept or comprehend our contemporary morality. And Lincoln, by our standards, was racist, but by his own society was fairly moderate, was to some extent was progressive. Even before he was president, he said he was an abolitionist and that he abhorred slavery. And he obviously did put forward the 13th Amendment of the US Constitution, which outlawed slavery. And as I said, I think he was a light progressive on, well, by his standards or his society standards, on race relations. So on what basis then can we say that Lincoln is bad for being a racist? By the standards of people who lived, a century or so after he died, in a time and place that he couldn't even envisage. How would we like it if in the mid-22nd century people condemn us for eating meat or for using electricity that has come from fossil fuels, when, let's say in that period, it's possible to grow artificial meat without killing a cow or killing a sheep or killing a pig or killing a, I don't know, I'm going to say killing a horse. Well, some people eat horses. By Western standards, it's not the done thing, but in other cultures it's the norm. Or killing a chicken, or killing a duck, or killing a goat. Well, you get the picture. Wouldn't they deem us as immoral, since the majority of the world today, it is the norm to eat meat? Yes, there are a few people who are vegan and vegetarian, but they are a minority. You know, it is still, you know, the majority of people do consume meat. That's just as our society is structured at the moment. We would think that's unfair because we would say, well, we would have no means to know of how people in the mid-22nd century, when probably all of us are long dead, would comprehend that. That would not be a fair assessment. So what makes our judgment of Lincoln any better or any worse than people in the mid-21st century who can healthily eat artificial meat without killing a living animal? There is no functional difference. So we have to accept then that times always change, morals always change, and we cannot impart the morality of contemporary times or any one era onto those of past eras, or possibly even future eras.